What do you mean 2 kids are coming tomorrow? It's too early. Izuku all but shouted into the phone. What do you mean, what do I mean? Naomi asked sarcastically on the other end. You just released a stream talking about how terrible DOC to the children they keep. People are up in arms. So we're moving a bit faster to get the kids to you. Izuku remembered Kiba's stream, and how his actions and what was said on that stream could lead to DOC freaking out a bit and doing something like this. The green-haired dad sighed, as he realized he kinda dug his own grave here. Well, I guess when you look at it that way it makes sense. Still, I wish you'd given me more of a heads up. You don't really need to prepare much. These kids don't require any special needs, outside of the ones they already have, that is. Naomi yawned. Well anyway, it's late so I'm gonna head to bed. It's 1 p.m., Izuku pointed out. And that's really late if you plan to stay up all night drinking, Naomi explained. Anyway, you should get the files for those 2 in a few hours or so. Bye. Naomi hung up, and Izuku felt a migraine washing over him. He wanted to take some medication for it, but according to the medical website he consulted, taking too much medication could have adverse effects on his health. Ugh. I feel so tired. I don't think I could even read the files like this. Izuku had no choice but to admit defeat and fall to his body's limitations this time around. My tablet will notify me of any new messages anyway. Reluctantly, Izuku made his way over from his desk, into his room, and finally onto his bed. He laid his tablet on the night table next to him and looked over at the seer grim that he had in his room. Wake me up when this goes off. The seer made a strange gurgly bony noise, to notify that it heard its instructions. With that done, Izuku closed his eyes and immediately passed out. A few hours later, after a few-hour nap that Izuku won't admit he desperately needed, he had received the files on the 2 new children and was currently finishing up on reading them. The children were siblings, a brother and sister, Junken and Nara, both 10 years old. Junken was of average height, brown hair, and green eyes, with a pretty average build. Nara was just a bit taller than her brother, with the same green eyes. She was a redhead, and her hair was short, not even going down to her shoulders. They had the same quirk, and that quirk was very interesting. Their quirks were called Omni and allowed each child to transform into 10 different forms, all of which had been given names, seemingly by the children themselves. Starting with Junken, the first form that was documented was apparently called Upgrade, and the photo showed it to be some sort of black, white, and yellow creature. It seemed to be like Sanson in that it wasn't really a solid creature, rather it was more like a sentient liquid. Its ability allowed it to merge itself with technology, which would not only give it control over said piece of technology, but also allow it to alter, or upgrade, that piece of technology. His second form, 4 Arms, was aptly named, as it did indeed have 4 arms. It essentially just looked like a big red guy with 2 sets of arms and eyes. This one's power seemed to be super strength, as well as reaping the benefits of having 4 arms. Wild Mutt was a massive, orange dog-like creature, about twice the size of a wolf. Noticeably it lacked any sort of eyes. Its ability, alongside its natural strength, agility, and claws, seemed to be some sort of smell-based sonar. Despite not having eyes, it can get a perfect sense of its surroundings. If anything, they were better than eyes. Stinkfly was a giant bug-like creature that, on top of smelling absolutely disgusting apparently, could fly. It also could shoot a strange sticky goop out of its 4 eyes, tentacles. Lastly, it also had a rather sharp tail that could apparently rip through steel. Igai was a large green muscular humanoid creature, with eyes all over its body, with a huge one in its chest, and on its face where its eyes would be, were 2 massive ears. Apparently, those eyes all shot lasers. Each one is powerful enough to rip through a car. Heat Blast was another humanoid, but this one looked to be made entirely out of rocks and fire. It was like Netsu, in that it had the ability to control and manipulate fire. It also had the ability to absorb fire into itself. Feedback was yet another humanoid, with a slick black color scheme with a dash of white. It had only 1 eye though, as well as 2 long antennae and a tail. A notable thing about those antennae and the tail is that at the ends of them were wire-like tubes, with holes at the end. These same things were at the tips of all of its fingers. The purpose of these tied into its main ability: absorbing, storing, and redirecting energy. It could absorb pretty much any kind of energy through those tubes, store it in its body, and then shoot it back out. Blitzwolfer was what one would imagine a werewolf to look like, complete with the imposing size and deadly claws. On top of the previously mentioned claws, it also had enhanced physiology, and its jaw could open up into 4 separate parts, and unleash a sonic attack similar to Present Mike. Second to last was Ripjaws, a giant fish-like creature with a massive, sharp jaw, and a thing on his head that reminded him of an anglerfish. It had 2 forms. One with legs that had webbed feet much like its webbed claws. And the other gave it a big tail, similar to a merman. This one was obviously aquatic and thus had the ability to breathe underwater. It could swim at incredible speeds, and its claws were extremely sharp. Although its jaw was even more dangerous, capable of chomping down on pretty much anything. This form however had a massive weakness, however, in that it needed water pretty much constantly, and could only survive without for about 4 minutes. Lastly for Junken, there was Ghost Freak. And as the name implied, it was very pale and ghost-like, being a roundish white figure with a tail instead of legs, a bunch of black trails running along its body, that its singular eye could move along. Much like a ghost it could turn intangible, as well as being able to possess people by going inside them. Moving on to Nara, her first form was called Grey Matter, and it was extremely small, only reaching just above Izuku's ankle. It was mostly humanoid except for its head, which was mostly taken up by its huge eyes that had rectangular pupils. Its main ability was enhanced intelligence. In this form, Nara was smart enough to construct complex machines out of junk. The next one was big, both in its height and in its width. It was called Cannon Bolt. It had a mostly white body with some black stripes and pink armored parts all around its body. According to the files, it could roll up into an armored ball and spin at rapid speeds, hitting into things and bouncing off walls like a living cannonball. Hence the name. Next was a humanoid lizard hybrid. It was very thin, with 3 sharp claws, and a pointy helmet-like head, and a long tail. The most notable feature was its feet, which seemed to have little ball wheels attached to them. This one, called XLR-8, could move at astounding speeds, capable of running on water, outspeeding cars, and even some trains. Moving on was another lizard-like creature, but this one was a quadruped. With a blue head and black and white body, it would be hard to tell what this creature's power was if the name Artiquanus didn't give it away. It could shoot blasts of extremely cool pressurized air that would freeze pretty much anything it touched. Back onto humanoids with the next one, Diamond Head. This was a large woman that seemed to be entirely made out of crystals. Despite the name, they weren't diamonds, but rather an extremely strong unique crystal that looked similar to diamond. On top of being incredibly durable, Diamond Head could manipulate their body, not like Sanson or Upgrade could, but rather they could shift it around a bit. As well as being able to shoot pieces of it off as projectiles, which implied that it also had some sort of regenerative abilities as well. Lastly, it could also cause crystals to grow and erupt nearby itself. Onto another smaller one, Ditto was the only one of these forms that didn't change Nara's height all that much. It was humanoid with cartoonishly large hands, and some fins on its head. Its main ability was cloning, able to make up to 30 copies of itself. Although all the clones experienced the same sensations, so if one clone got hurt all the others would feel it. It's unknown what would happen if one of the clones died. From small to big, came the biggest transformation here. Humongaser, a giant humanoid dinosaur creature that stood around 20 feet tall. It could also grow to about 30 feet in a similar way to MT Lady, although doing so, would strain its heart as it tried to pump blood through the entire body, and thus would cause the creature to faint if they remained in that state for too long. Their size gave the user incredible strength, however, they would be rather slow. The next one, Blocks, was a gorilla made up of multicolored Lego blocks? Well, there were stranger quirks. Regardless, the creature had the ability to manipulate and shift its body, as well as break it apart, like a Lego set. Its blocks seemed to be about as tough as steel, so they were very durable. And it also seemed to be able to regrow its lost body parts at an accelerated rate. Wildvine was next, and it appeared to be a giant moving Venus flytrap with tentacle-like roots for legs, and a head with a single eye coming out of the mouth of the trap. This one had the ability to control plants in its nearby surroundings, as well as being able to, much like Blocks, stretch and manipulate its body at will and could regenerate. It also had black egg-like seeds growing from its back, which according to the notes, exploded like grenades after 5 seconds of them being removed from their back. The last form was called Lodestar. Another humanoid one, it being mostly black with some blue thrown in. Its hands, feet, and shoulders all were shaped like strange tuning forks, with the head floating in between its two large shoulders via some sort of magnetic power. Speaking of magnetic power, that seemed to be its ability. Lodestar could control and bend metal to its will, using its hands. Its body was also made up of hundreds of thousands of smaller magnets, allowing it to put itself back together if it gets harmed, although its head is completely solid, and can't regenerate in any way. With this many forms and this many abilities, it would seem like these kids would be the most powerful and versatile of them of all, if it weren't for a few major weaknesses. The first and most important was that both children could only stay in their forms for about 10 minutes. Afterward, they would turn back to normal and wouldn't be able to use their quirk again for another 10 minutes. It's speculated that with further training, exercising their quirk, and just aging, this time limit could be expanded. Another weakness is that seemingly, once they transformed into something, they could not shift into another form. Or at least they couldn't do so currently. Perhaps with more training, this could be achievable. Lastly, was the issue of them not having full control of what they transformed into. Sometimes they panic and shift into a random form, which could cause problems. However, none of this would be all that terrible. So far, while they were powerful, they didn't seem overly dangerous. It made Izuku wonder why exactly their parents gave them up. Until he got to the last detail. And one of the most important ones. In their various forms, their personalities could shift slightly. Nara as XLR8 would become more impatient and twitchy. When Junken was Wild Mutt, he would act more dog-like. They were still themselves, and for the most part, this wasn't an issue. Except with one particular transformation. Ghost Freak. For context, these children were born to rather neglectful parents, who occasionally shouted verbal abuse at them. This caused resentment to build up in the two children, which was reasonable. This resentment is typically buried in fear of punishment from their parents. Of course, the kids could very easily physically overpower their parents. However, the duo did have a solid moral compass at least, and thus wouldn't try such things. That was until Ghost Freak came into the equation. The personality change that came with Ghost Freak was that it caused Junken to be more spiteful, angrier, and more wrathful, as well as being far more disposed to violence. This eventually caused Junken to straight up attack his own parents, which is what led to him being taken by DOC, with Nara insisting that she leave with him. Ghost Freak, however, would continue to be a problem, attacking people out of spite and anger. And seeing as it could go through walls, containing him was a big issue. Junken of course hated this and absolutely didn't want to transform into Ghost Freak. However, due to their difficulties with controlling transformation, he sometimes didn't have a choice. So DOC came up with a solution that would fix the accidental transformation issue. The Omnitrix. Named after the two's quirk, Omni, and Trick, because it was a trick. It was a watch-like support item that was attached to the user's wrist. The user would press down on a button, and a dial would pop up, showing a silhouette of one of their forms. They would rotate the dial to cycle through the silhouettes until they reached the form they wanted to be in, and then all they would have to do is press down on the dial, and then they would be in that form. They wouldn't be able to use their quirk without using the Omnitrix, and Ghost Freak's silhouette wasn't available on Junken's watch, so he could no longer access that form. Except that was a lie. The only thing the Omnitrix actually did was the button thing and the silhouette thing. It didn't actually control Junken and Nara's quirks, at all. That was scientifically impossible. Essentially, it was just a toy with almost no practical use except for a built-in timer, that would cause the device to glow red if they were running out of time, or if their quirk was recharging. But Nara and Junken didn't know that. They were under the assumption that the Omnitrix could control and regulate their quirk. And because they believed this, they no longer suffered these accidental transformations. It was just one big placebo. It wasn't perfect, however, as the device itself essentially did nothing, and the control was reliant on the two's mental state. If they were extremely stressed or angry or something like that, then it would still be possible for them to have a transformation error. This was explained to the children as a glitch that would rarely occur. Izuku was, as he found himself more and more these days, of two minds about this. On the one hand, it was really the only way to prevent Junken from going on a rampage, and it would prevent a bunch of other mishaps as well. But on the other hand, this could be detrimental to their growth in the future. If they allow themselves to grow reliant on that device, then they would never learn how to control their quirks on their own. Izuka sighed. I guess I'll let them keep thinking that for now. Hopefully, Junken will be less resentful and have more control of himself in the future, and I'll be able to tell him then. Until then, he would let them keep believing the lies DOC told them. Alright, preparing their rooms should be easy enough. I'll put them right next to each other since they're siblings. Izuka spoke aloud. This should go smoothly, right? As if life wanted to immediately prove him wrong, he suddenly broke out into a coughing fit, and blood flew out of his mouth. He looked down at his blood-stained fist, and to his horror, he found it was even more blood than the last time. Alright. I'll take a break. For an hour. Izuka sighed. Then I'll book a doctor's appointment. In a month. That was a good time, right? The next day, Junken and Nara rode in the DOC limousine. In complete silence. Nara was shifting in her seat anxiously, looking around the window periodically. Her brother, on the other hand, was just casually messing with his Omnitrix. After looking out the window, Nara looked back at Junken with a worried expression. Why are you so calm? Why are you so stressed? Junken asked in return. It's just another government facility. It's just run by a different guy. It's not just another government facility. It's gonna be our home until we can live by ourselves. Nara pointed out sharply. And that guy is gonna be our legal guardian. He might actually, care about us. Junken scoffed. Yeah, right. We all know adults are all self-centered. What, so you're gonna be self-centered when you get older? Oh wait, you're already self-centered. Nara smirked for a moment before her serious expression returned. Even if that's true, there's gonna be other people our age. This could be our chance to make some real friends for once. PSH. Who needs friends? I have all the friends I need in here. Junken said, holding up his Omnitrix. Nara rolled her eyes. Well, you can be a friendless loser all you want. I am gonna actually try and socialize. That means talking to people, by the way. I know what that means. Junken lied. And I doubt you'll make any. Have you looked in a mirror? Before Nara could give a scathing retort, the car came to a stop. A few seconds later, Junken's door was opened by an agent. We're here. The two kids climbed out of the car and were immediately met with the sight of the enormous building that was the Midoriya household. Both children looked at it in awe, with eyes wide as dinner plates, as they looked up at the building. Whoa! Junken gasped. This place is huge. It is a lot to take in, isn't it? The two looked back down and saw Izuku walking towards them, with Kei by his side. Hello there. Izuku greeted them with a smile on his face. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I'll be your guardian from now on. And I'm Kei Midoriya. Nice to meet ya, Kei said, rushing over to the two of them and extending her hand out for a handshake. The two didn't return that handshake though, because they were too busy staring at Izuku in disbelief. Izuku sighed. Yeah, I'm probably younger than you expected. I get that a lot. I ask you to just ignore that. It'll make everything much easier. Okay, Nara said. This wasn't what I expected, at all. Hey, don't forget about me. Kei started waving her hands in front of the two to get their attention, eventually getting them to focus on her. Oh sorry. Nara looked at Kei's hair for a few seconds, before forcing herself to look away and focus on her face instead. My name's Nara. Nice to meet you. Junken did not have the same tact and openly stared at Kei's hair. Your hair is freaky. Smack. Ow. Junken cried out in pain and Nara smacked him on the back of the head. Don't be insensitive, you jerk. Nara quickly scolded her brother, before turning to Kei with a worried expression. I am so sorry about him. I'm sure you snakes are wonderful. Kei smiled at the compliment, and her snakes hissed pleasingly. Thanks. And don't worry. I've been called much worse. Nara flinched at that statement and looked at the girl apologetically. Oh, sorry. It's okay. Kei then turned to Junken. Hi. What's your name? Junken. But just call me Ken. The older boy insisted as he took a step back, Kei's overflowing energy being a bit much for him. Meanwhile, in the background, the DOC agents had finished taking the two kids' stuff out of the car. That's everything. We're leaving. Izuku nodded, as the DOC agents got in their car and drove away. Well, we should take you and your things up to your room, Izuku said, as he took a whistle out of his pocket and blew on it. By the way, don't panic. The two children gave him a confused look, but before they could ask why he said that, two Beringels jumped off the roof and crashed into the ground, startling both children. Ah, They both shouted in fear, both jumping back and instinctively pressing the buttons on their Omnitrix, ready to transform and take on the beasts. "Wait!" Izuku shouted out, stopping both the kids who gave him confused and panicked looks. "Don't worry. These are friendly." "They don't look friendly," Nara exclaimed. "They're like demons." Ken shouted. "Yup. Those are the Grimm," Kay explained. "They're scary, but they won't hurt you. They help a lot around the house too. Watch this. Do a jump." At her command, the bearing elves jumped 12 feet in the air, before crashing back down into the ground with a loud thud. As Kay said, these are the Grimm. They are essentially mindless puppets that act as servants. These ones are called Biringels. There are other types of Grimm, but they all have a similar aesthetic. So you should be able to tell what's a Grimm and what's not. Izuku explains further, before looking at the Grimm. "Grab their luggage, and follow us." The Grimm nodded and did as they were instructed, grabbing the luggage in their massive hands, before turning to Izuku, waiting for him to go somewhere. "Kay, why don't you go tell everyone else about the others? I'd like to introduce them to everything a bit more," calmly. Izuku asked her. Kay frowned for a moment, before nodding and running back into the house. "Okay, you two follow me to your rooms. You're free to ask any questions you'd like on the way," Izuku says as he started walking into the house, with the two kids and the Grimm in tow. When the kids got into the house, they immediately started looking around, admiring the sheer size of the facility. They managed to get all the way up the first flight of stairs, before starting to ask questions. "So, can we control these things too?" Ken asked Izuku in a hopeful tone. Nara rolled her eyes. "Really, that's the first question you want to ask? What? You're telling me you don't want to control an army of demon monsters?" Ken asked defensively. Izuku gave an amused chuckle. Control of the Grimm is given to all the kids and staff. Although Yami is the only one capable of giving people that control. He's another one of the kids here and makes these with his quirk. So if you want control of them you just have to go to him. "Sweet." Ken pumped his fist. Nara face-bombed and shook her head at her brother's childishness, before looking up and around herself. She saw a few more Grimm walking around. A few Beowulfs and a passing seer. But no humans. No children. Speaking of the kids and staff. "Where are they?" Nara asked. "Most of the kids are either in their rooms or outside. There may be a few others scattered throughout the house," Izuku explained. "As for the staff, well, I haven't really hired any yet." "Wait, you mean you've been doing all this by yourself?" Nara asked, a bit shocked that such a big place only had one human worker. "Man, no wonder you look so tired," Ken noted. "You must be doing a lot of work." "You could say that," Izuku responded. Soon enough they reached two doors, with Nara and Ken's names on them. "Set the bags down in front of the rooms, and then go back to your post," Izuku ordered the bearing elves. The Grimm did as ordered, before going away, leaving Izuku with the kids. "These will be your rooms. You're free to decorate them as you please. If you want anything, there is a board in one of the hallways where you can write down what you want. I'll try to get it for you before the end of the week," Izuku explained. "Awesome," Ken cheered. "You know, you're actually pretty cool. Don't expect me to call you Dad though." "That's fine," Izuku reassured him. "A lot of people here think of me as a dad, but that's their choice. On paper I'm just your legal guardian, so you can consider me to be anything you want." "Thank you for everything." Nara gave Izuku a polite bow. "We really appreciate it." Izuku smiled at them kindly. "You're welcome. If you need anything else, I'll be in my office on the top floor. Also, in your files, it said you wanted to be heroes?" "Yup. You're looking at the future, #1 hero," Ken said cockily. "I think you'd have to have a brain to be #1 Nimrod," Nara scoffed. "But yeah, we're gonna be heroes when we get older. Why bring it up?" "Well, there are actually quite a few other kids here that also want to be heroes. They spar against each other a lot, so feel free to join in," Izuku told them. "Also there is a training room where you can use your quirks at full power, without worrying about causing too much damage." "Seriously? This place is awesome," Ken shouted, before running away. "Training room, here I come." "Hey wait Doofus, you don't even know where you're going." Nara chased after her brother, leaving Izuku behind. "I have a strong feeling that those two are gonna be a handful," Izuku sighed.